And there's challenges, when you buy a park that's all, tenant-owned homes.
But on the park-owned home model, your top-line number is big.
You got to look at what you want the community to be as a whole.
Hello, everyone. I'm Frank Rizzo. With me is my co-host and partner, Eric Busuttil. We're here on this mobile home park podcast. We're talking today, and this is a question that I get a lot from a lot of people who I speak with regarding the industry, is what is better? Is it better for us to talk about it when you buy a park? Is it better to have park-owned homes? Is it better to have tenant-owned homes? Like, what is better for your community? And there's pros and cons on each one, right? And sometimes, and I don't want to take Eric's words and use it, but sometimes when you buy these communities or you get into the space, you can get a mixed bag, right? Sometimes you find a community that's everything is going to be a tenant-owned home. Sometimes you find that it's all going to be a park-owned home. And sometimes it's a little bit of both, right? And how you blend it together. But, having owned and operated over 18 communities in our during our career, I think we've been able to see a little bit of everything. So, Eric, I'm going to ask you the question first. Do you want to hear the question first? All right. I mean, you read my mind. I know we work a lot together. Do you know what I'm going to say?
Probably.
What am I going to say?
Just ask.
All right, I'll ask it. So, what do you think is better operationally? Is it better to have park-owned homes, or is it better to have tenant-owned homes?
I kind of knew that was the question. But I think before I answer that question, I think it's important to, especially if you've never owned one of these properties. When I bought my first property, or when I first speak to someone who's interested in what I'm doing, is their first question is I don't understand. Do you own the homes? Do you not own the homes? Right? So that's the first thing. There's some people just don't even know how it goes, right? And I think there's different models, right? And there's different property operators, and some of them like to own the homes and rent the homes, period. And some like to just own the land, and rent the land to the homeowners. And to ask which is better, I think that's very difficult to answer that question directly. I like owning the land and only renting the lots. I mean, and that's our model. And it takes some time, because like Frank said, when you buy a property, you're not always buying a property where all the homes are tenant-owned homes or all the homes are park-owned homes. Although we have bought a community where the primary majority of the homes are tenant-owned homes, and we only had a few of them. And there's challenges, when you buy a park that's all, tenant-owned homes.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people don't recognize some of those challenges, right? Because you speak to a lot of people and they're like, well, I don't want any park-owned homes, right? I just want tenant-owned homes. And first of all, that blocks out a lot of what's available in the marketplace, right? So as soon as you say that, you're saying, well, I'm not going to take any park-owned homes. Well, now there's not a lot of communities that are 100% tenant-owned homes, and you're knocking that out, which may be a really good opportunity to look at. Might be a great community, might have a lot of upside, might have some ways that might be a community that you could manage and take down. So I do think you have to be open to it, but there are some challenges in the tenant-owned home itself, and I think you've got to look deeper, right? You have to look at the year, the make, the model of the homes, right? So if everybody owns the home, but they're all, late model homes, say early 80s, late 70s, mid 80s, what do you do, right? What do you do if you have a community where you don't own the homes, and now they're homes that are almost 40 years old, and they've been degrading, right? Because that's what will happen. If you don't maintain these homes, they will degrade. You know, you'll see the rust spots on the roof. The skirting gets pulled away. The siding looks a little, little worn and tired. What do you do?
Let's say you buy a community that's a, 90 lot, mobile home community, and there are 60 on-site tenant-owned homes. And let's use your example, Frank. Let's say they're all, late 80s, 90s models, and they're in rough shape, however you want to slice it. And you're buying it for what it is, right? You're buying the land at that point, and you're buying the tenants that are paying the land. But now you have these vacant lots, right? And what do you do with vacant lots? You want to bring in homes, right? And if you have 60 outdated homes, and
that's a great point.
You want to bring in brand new homes. Try selling a brand new home to someone who's going to pay, whatever the price point is that you're at. Let's say you're selling a lower model home, 60, 70 grand home. Try selling a $60,000, $70,000 home to someone who's living next to a person who's been in that home for 30 years and has not done anything to that home. It's a very, very challenging situation you're going to have there. And there's and we've been in that situation. And that's that's one of the challenges that I think we actually found out a little bit later into our 8-year run.
Yeah. And I think you have to be prepared for that, right? Because it's great to say, well, everybody owns their home. I don't have to worry about it. I'm going to worry about the infill, and I'm going to bring in new homes. But like you just mentioned, it's tough. It's tough for somebody to come in at a different price point when the housing stock there looks dated, worn, and tired, right? Because nobody wants to go in there to a community there where they're paying the highest. No one wants to be the highest price point in any block, right? People want to know that they're getting value. So when you have for that, before you even can get to the infill situation, you have to address the tenant-owned homes, right? And the challenge is you don't own the housing stock to address it, right? So what do you do, right? You have to have a plan in place of what you're going to do to either incentivize or to provide the opportunity to upgrade those homes, or at least a majority of those homes, before you could even consider the infill.
Exactly right, Frank. And there's different things that you can do, right? But you hit it on the head again. What is your plan before going into that project? It's super important. I mean,
and allocating the capital for it, right?
Exactly.
And
what we have done is, what we have done in certain situations is, obviously we always want to instill community rules, and some of these community rules are that your house has to meet certain standards, and we put these standards in place because if they don't meet these standards, that late 80s model home that has not had much work done over the course of 30 years, in another 5 years, I mean, that home is literally falling apart, and it could be dangerous, right? It could, and it just, it'll dissipate.
And it'll create community blight.
Create community blight. So we've come into properties like that, and we've actually just bit the bullet and built it into our model to assist these tenants in fixing up their homes. I mean, if we own a community and the roofs are totally rusted, or you can see that they need work, we'll come into that community and we'll do the roofs, knowing that we're going to allow these tenants to be there for an extra handful of years just by us doing that. In other situations, we've done siding, we've painted homes, we've assisted people in skirting their homes, and this is one of a few things. We've brought amenities to communities and talked with those current owners and I think worked with them.
And it generates a tremendous amount of goodwill in doing in other things that you want to institute in the community when you're willing to lead forward, right, and do some of the work that in many cases the resident would want to do. Absolutely. Right? I mean, I don't know a resident that doesn't want to have skirting around their home. They just might not have the capability of getting it done, right? And so that's a reality when you're dealing in affordable housing. Sometimes the resident might be well-intentioned, but just doesn't have the capacity to get it done. So, if being able to assist them helps them, gets the resident to appreciate the fact that, hey, there's new ownership, there might be some new rules, but some good has come out of it for me, and so I'm willing to buy into maybe a new system. But it also maintains the integrity of the community as we're bringing in, or you're bringing in, newer homes to fill up those vacant lots.
Let's remember what this topic is. What are the pros and cons? All right, some of the pros and cons. When you have tenant-owned homes, right? Typically, the tenant is taking care of their home, right? And in certain situations, when we go into a property, if it's a community where it's primarily rentals, it takes some time to, either convert or, sell people the homes. And, when they're owning their own home, they are taking more pride in their own home, and they are taking care of their home more than if they were just renting their own home.
But on the park-owned home model, your top line number is bigger, right? So for some people that run on the park-owned home number, especially, if you have homes that are well-maintained, listen, when you do a tenant-owned home and you've got a lot rent, I mean, that's going to be a lot different than what you might be able to rent a 3-bedroom home for, right? In some markets we're in, a 3-bedroom home might be $1,200 to $1,500 a month. Your lot rent might be $350 a month. Or $300 a month. I mean, there's a big discrepancy there, right? From the park-owned home, you have to maintain the home at that point. But sometimes that spread is so wide that you're willing to say, hey, I'm gonna run the park-owned home model because it is not going to cost me, right? $700 a month to maintain that home, right? I'm going to generate more income for me at the end of the day if the numbers work. And again, that's where you have to go back to the integrity of the homes, the year, the make, the model, the value that the homes that are in place, right? And if you have a newer model, right, or you have new model homes in that community, having a park-owned home might not be a detriment, right? Might be something that you could, operate with, because at the end of the day, it may be more profitable for you.
And the biggest thing to look at inside of this, and I know I might have mentioned this before in other conversations, is you got to look at what you want the community to be as a whole, right? And the one example I gave you before, where you have 60 tenant-owned homes and you have a 90-unit park. There's also been an instance where we've purchased a park where 90% of the homes were occupied by tenants. What do you do in that situation where there's not a lot of control of any of the homes that you have in there? What do you do in that situation, Frank?
When you have that, you have to get buy-in from the residents that these are the changes we want to make. This is what the standard's going to be. We're going to give you, we're going to hope that you get there yourself, but if you can't, we're going to assist you. But there's going to be two paths, and it has to be clear, right? And I think not having clarity of what you want from that community day one becomes a challenge, right? So you can't, when you walk into that community, you have to, in your due diligence, in your time prior to, you have to have a clear vision to let your customers know, right? Like your residents or your customers, they need to know what to expect, right? And then be able to follow it through, right? And like you said earlier, if you're going to assist a resident, have that written into your plan and understand that this is the capital that it's going to be required to do it. I'm willing to make that commitment to do it. Here's the value that that's going to create. Here's what it's going to do for the residents, and here's what it's going to do for us as the operators. And that's a big key in it. So, obviously not having to worry about, I got to change a light bulb in the kitchen is great. but sometimes having those park-owned home models in a community, sometimes that could work as well. The challenge, I think, that you have to remember in all of this, right? Whatever model you do, is on the lending portion of it, right? So if you're going to recapitalize that community, I mean, and we're assuming that you're buying it park, I guess, in the cash in this conversation. But if you're going for financing, right? Lenders, how they view park-owned home income may be different than they would view it in any other space, right? You own a 60-unit apartment building, all that income is income, right? You have 60 park-owned homes. Is the bank going to give you credit for all of that income?
The primary source of revenue that the lender is looking at is the revenue to the land, right? So it could be tricky, right? They may not take into consideration all of the income coming from the home if it's a straight rental, right? And that's where it's going to depend on, what kind of caliber of home you have, right? I mean, if you have a 1975 or 1985 model home and a person is just paying rent, you're going to get very little income. The lender is going to account for use of a very low amount of that income.
Yeah, but if you have newer model homes, they may give you they might look at the income the same, but they may value the home separately, right? And give you some financing based off of the value of the homes, right? So they'll blend.
Well, not only are they going to give you financing, if they give you financing off the value of the home, they're going to want to lien that home.
Correct.
Right? Where when you're getting income to the land, they're typically not liening any of the homes, right? So it's there's a lot of little ticky-tack things in here that you got to look at, and it's very difficult for you to say which one is better, right? I think in the long term, especially if you're going to operate a property like this from a distance, you have to get away from taking care of these homes, right? And you want to put that onto the tenant because if these tenants don't own these homes, I mean, ultimately, you're going to be constantly fixing these homes. And if you're not there on site, hands-on doing a lot of this yourself, it's very difficult to manage that, especially from a distance.
So it seems like Eric has a favorite,
Right.
but I would also make a note. And if you're listening to this podcast, and you're looking to buy a community, and you're financing it, I would also talk to the lenders and make sure you have a schedule, right? Year, make, model. Have the NADA value of those homes, right? Because that NADA value, these homes will have an NADA value associated with the year, make, and model of that. And that can give you a secondary valuation, right, that you could provide to a lender and see what kind of financing they could give off of that if they're not going to include the park-owned home income. So that's something else that you should look at. Guys, this has been Eric, this has been a great episode. I love having these conversations with you. And if you have any questions, if somebody out there has any questions, you can find us on the Mobile Home Park Exchange. We love hearing these questions. We get a lot of these topics come from conversations we have with, potential investors or people looking to get into this space, or community owners, people who own communities who might, stepped in and have some questions about operating. We'd love to hear your questions. We'd love to get more information for you. This is obviously an exchange of information. My name's Frank Rizzo. That's my partner, Eric Busuttil. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen.